Welcome to Venice, where water and stone come together. Gondolas glide through centuries of history, and every narrow street has a story waiting to be discovered. Venice is a city born of dreams and boldness. Located in northeastern Italy, it stretches across 118 islands in the Adriatic Sea lagoon, bound together by more than 150 canals and nearly 400 bridges. This is not a city built on water, but in it. Its foundations rest on thousands of wooden piles driven into the marshy ground. Wood that, cut off from air, never rots in the damp soil. The story of Venice begins in the 5th century, when people fleeing invading armies took refuge on the water. They built homes, temples, and palaces, not on solid land, but upon the tides. Over time, Venice rose to power, the queen of the seas, a hub of trade and a masterpiece of art and architecture. This maritime republic ruled not only on the waters, but extended its influence deep into the mainland. Today, Venice feels like a waking dream, a magnet for travelers, artists, and romantics, offering a glimpse of wonder and a quiet lesson in the fragility of beauty. Our walk through Venice is just the beginning. We've prepared a whole video series to guide you step by step through the most stunning corners of this magical city. If you'd like to join us on this journey, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next route. And now, let's begin our walk. We'll lead you through narrow streets, across bridges and canals, past churches and palaces, into the very soul of Venice. Today, we invite you to explore the heart of the city, St. Mark's Square. Venice welcomes you from the very first moment, with water at your feet, light in the air, and the scent of the sea all around. If you're flying in, you'll arrive at Marco Polo Airport, right on the edge of the lagoon. From there, you've got a few ways to reach the city, but the most Venetian way? Hop on a Vaporetto, the city's water bus. You step straight onto a boat, and as you glide across the water, Venice slowly reveals itself, a city rising from the sea like a dream. If you're coming by train, you'll arrive at Venezia Santa Lucia station. Behind you, the modern world. Ahead, the labyrinth of narrow Venetian streets. And your first bridge, Ponte degli Scalzi, with the Grand Canal flowing beneath. From there, it's a walk through the heart of Venice. You can stroll, take a Vaporetto, or if you're feeling a little fancy, ride a private water taxi. Today we're heading to Venice's most iconic spot, St. Mark's Square, the most visited, most photographed, and, as locals love to say, the most often flooded square in the world. You enter between two massive columns. On one stands St. Mark, the city's patron, shown as a winged lion, a symbol of courage, strength, and wisdom. According to legend, his relics were smuggled from Alexandria in the 9th century. Since then, his lion has become the proud emblem of Venice. The other column holds Saint Theodore, an earlier patron of the city, standing boldly over a dragon like a Venetian St. George. There was once a third column, but it sank into the lagoon during construction. And here's something locals will tell you. Executions used to take place between those two columns. Even today, many Venetians avoid walking between them. They say it brings bad luck. So, just to be safe, maybe walk around. Welcome to St. Mark's Square, the very heart of Venice, where the city reveals its most beautiful face. Surrounded by masterpieces of architecture, bathed in the glow of the lagoon, and filled with the quiet music of footsteps, echoing on stone just as they have for centuries. Napoleon once called it the most beautiful drawing room in Europe, and honestly, it's hard to disagree. Look up, and you'll see the square's silent guardian, the majestic, towering Campanile. That's St. Mark's Bell Tower, watching over Venice from nearly 330 feet high. The tower you see today is a faithful reconstruction. The original collapsed without warning in 1902. Miraculously, no one was hurt except the caretaker's cat, whose story still lives on in Venetian legend. Right after the collapse, the people of Venice swore, "We will rebuild it where it stood and as it was." And they did. Though this time they reinforced the foundations, so unlike many towers in Venice, this one stands perfectly straight and solid. For centuries, the Campanile wasn't just a bell tower. It was a lighthouse guiding ships safely home. And it was the city's timekeeper, its 5 bells marking the rhythm of daily life. The largest bell, Marangona, signaled the start and end of the workday. Nona and Mezzaterza rang to mark the hours. Trottiera summoned nobles to meetings and votes. And the most ominous, Maleficia, called the public to witness executions. The bells didn't just tell time, they drew invisible lines between the allowed and the forbidden. In 1310, a law was passed. After the third night bell rang, no one could leave their home without official permission. The Campanile reminded Venetians not just of passing hours, but of the discipline and order the city demanded to protect its people and preserve its power. If you have a moment, take the elevator to the top. The view of Venice's red rooftops and the endless lagoon beyond will take your breath away. In the shadow of the Campanile stands one of Venice's most magnificent buildings, the Doge's Palace. For centuries, this was the very center of power in the Republic of Venice. It wasn't just the residence of the Doge, the city's highest official, but also the seat of government, the courts, and the secret councils that ruled behind closed doors. The Doge was both a symbol of the state and its prisoner. Elected for life from among the wealthiest and most influential citizens, usually already in old age, to limit ambition, he was honored yet bound by strict tradition. Over the course of Venetian history, there were exactly 120 Doges. From the first, Paolo Lucio Anafesto in the 7th century, to the last, Ludovico Manin, who was forced to step down in 1797 under pressure from Napoleon's advancing troops. If you look at Venetian paintings or tombs, you can easily spot the Doge by his distinct pointed cap, called the Corno Ducale. He also wore a long purple robe, richly embroidered with gold, a costume that reflected both his elevated role and its careful limitations. Everything about it reminded Venetians that the Doge was the Republic's first citizen. Respected, yes, but always bound by the rules and customs of La Serenissima. The Doge's palace is a marvel of lightness and elegance. With its delicate arches and lace-like marble details, it seems to float above the water. While other Italian cities built massive defensive fortresses, Venice, protected by the lagoon, embraced light, open, airy architecture. The original palace dates back to the 9th century, when it was built as a Byzantine fortress, though no visible traces of that early version remain today. Only the thick lower walls hint at its defensive past. From the 12th century onward, the palace was expanded several times, with the main construction phase finishing in 1438. Over the next 2 centuries, more elements were added, blending Eastern influences, Gothic design, and Venetian Renaissance into one unique masterpiece. Its main entrance, the Porta della Carta, is one of the most grand and symbolic gateways in the entire city. The name Paper Gate comes from the public scribes and clerks who once worked nearby copying official documents. Above the arch, you'll see a statue of Doge Francesco Foscari, kneeling humbly before the winged lion, the symbol of St. Mark. Just beyond the gate, inside the courtyard, rise the monumental giant's staircase, the Scala dei Giganti. Built in 1486, the staircase led to the first floor loggia. In the 16th century, two towering statues were added, Mars and Neptune, symbols of Venice's domination over land and sea. It was here at the top of these very steps that one of the Republic's most important ceremonies took place, the official coronation of a new Doge. Though often associated with Gothic architecture, the palace's facade reveals strong Venetian Byzantine influences, especially in the rhythm of the columns and the intricate Eastern inspired carvings. But behind this ornate facade wasn't just ceremony and splendor. This was where the fate of the city was decided. Here, councils met in secret, trials were held, interrogations carried out, and executions ordered. The Doge's palace was a stage for power and also for its darker shadows. Deep inside the building were the prisons, including the notorious Piombai, the leads, cells built just beneath the lead-covered roof. In summer, the heat was suffocating. In winter, bone-chilling cold. From here in the 18th century, Venice's most infamous prisoner made his daring escape, Giacomo Casanova. Conman, lover, adventurer, he spent months in those prison cells before pulling off a legendary escape across the palace rooftops. The prison was connected to the Doge's palace by a closed corridor, the Bridge of Sights. It crossed over the canal and took its name from the condemned prisoners who walked it on their way to jail, casting one final look at freedom and letting out a heavy sigh. But the Doge's palace was more than a prison or a court. This was where Venice built its true power, not with armies or swords, but with diplomacy. Venetians were masters of negotiation, weaving together trade agreements, political alliances, and secret deals into a web of influence that stretched far beyond the Adriatic. They had their own spy network and trained ambassadors not only in negotiation, but in the art of listening. Because in Venice, you could often achieve more with a single word than with an entire army. It was thanks to this quiet, careful strategy that Venice remained independent for centuries, balancing between Europe's great powers without a massive army or vast land holdings. As you walk through the corridors of the Doge's palace, you might notice stone boxes carved with grotesque lion faces. These were known as Bocca di Leone, the mouths of lion, and they were used for public denunciations. Citizens could drop written complaints inside about corruption, fraud, or even minor trade violations. But they weren't anonymous. Each accusation had to be signed and backed by two witnesses who guaranteed the claim. These boxes were placed all over the city, near courts, government offices, and public squares. In Venice, everyone watched, everyone listened, everyone knew. Despite the maze of alleyways, it was hard to truly hide. Venetian records contain meticulous transcripts of interrogations, some over trivial matters, others quite serious. Many confessions were extracted under pressure or even torture. Because in the Republic of Venice, control over the people was just as precise as its statecraft. Today, the Bocca di Leone remain as a reminder that behind the city's beauty and grace was a republic that never hesitated to protect its power at any cost. Just a few steps away from the Doge's palace stands the most important church in all of Venice. But before we step closer, take a moment to look at the corner of the Basilica, the one next to the palace. There you'll find the tetrarchs, four figures carved in deep purple porphyry, locked together in a tight embrace. Their faces are nearly identical, tense, watchful, and full of unease, arms wrapped around each other in a gesture of forced unity. This sculpture is a copy of a 4th century original, depicting the Roman emperors who ruled in the final days of the empire. But to many in Venice, the tetrarchs represent something else, a quiet reminder that here everyone sees, everyone hears, everyone knows. The tetrarchs were war spoils, brought to Venice after the city's conquest of Constantinople in 1204. They often go unnoticed by hurried tourists. But if you pause here for just a moment, you'll feel the weight of the centuries in this ancient stone. And then, rising before us, unfolds St. Mark's Basilica, a kaleidoscope of history, like a story told in stone and light. Dedicated in 832 as a mausoleum for the relics of St. Mark and as a Doge's ceremonial chapel, it soon became a symbol of Venice's power and wealth. Look at the facade. It's almost impossible to believe that every mosaic, every slab of marble was brought here from distant lands. Five grand arches filled with golden scenes from the life of St. Mark stretch across the lower level between elegant marble columns. Above them, balconies glitter with detail, and above those, more mosaics, arches, and sculpted capitals, layered like a stage set in a golden play. Then, above it all, you'll see them, four powerful horses gazing out over the square with regal pride. The famous quadriga, cast in gilded bronze, a rare masterpiece of the ancient world. Their journey is as remarkable as Venice itself. They too were brought from Constantinople after the Fourth Crusade in 1204. Placed atop the basilica's balcony, they became a proud emblem of Venetian triumph, a sign that Venice ruled not only the seas, but had conquered the memory of empire itself. But their story didn't end there. In 1797, after the fall of the Republic, Napoleon seized the horses and sent them to Paris. For several years, they stood atop the Arc de Triomphe du Carrousel, facing the Louvre, symbols of French dominance. Only after Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo were they returned to Venice. Their homecoming was emotional. A moment of restored dignity for a city that had lost its sovereignty. Today the horses you see are replicas. The originals, to protect them from time and the salt air of the lagoon, are preserved inside the Basilica's museum. But even in replica, with their bold lines and muscular grace, they speak of ambition, glory, and the turbulent history of Venice. Once your eyes have taken in the majesty of the quadriga, let your gaze fall to the richly decorated facade below. Because here, nestled between arches and columns, another story unfolds. A story told in mosaics. St. Mark's Basilica doesn't just carry the weight of empires and wars, it still breathes the spirit of Byzantine icon. Golden backgrounds, shimmering tiles, and vivid scenes full of meaning and magnificence. The facade is like a giant illuminated manuscript. Each mosaic, a page telling the story of St. Mark, of Venice itself, and of the faith that guided them both. Most of the mosaics you see today were created in the 1600s, painstakingly replacing earlier designs. But sadly, not all of them survived. In the 19th century, during a controversial restoration, the mosaics from the north and south facades were removed, a loss still mourned to this day. As if whole chapters of that stone-written book were torn out and lost forever. To the left of the basilica's main entrance stands an elegant white structure, the Torre del Orologio, or Clock Tower. Built in the late 15th century, this tower was not only a marvel of architecture and engineering, but also an observation post. From the top, guards had a clear view of St. Mark's Square and its surroundings, ensuring that the city lived in harmony and order. But inside the tower is something even more remarkable, a complex mechanism that has marked the rhythm of Venetian life for over 500 years. At the very top stand two dark bronze figures, known as the Mori, the Moors. Each holds a hammer, and every hour, on the hour, they strike a massive bell that echoes across the square. The older figure represents time that has passed, the younger, time yet to come. Their endless task reminded Venetians of life's fleeting nature and the strict rhythm of duty in the Republic. Just below, a striking blue and gold clock face shows not only the hour, but also the phases of the moon and the signs of the zodiac. Venetians believed the stars shaped both the tides and their lives. To the left of the tower, elegant arcades stretched outward, marking the beginning of a long wing that frames the square. As you walk beneath the arches, you step into another story, a story of art, power, and everyday Venetian life. The building ahead is the Procuratie Nuove, the new procuresses, a 17th century wing built for the Republic's highest officials, the procurators of St. Mark. Their homes and offices once filled this entire wing, built as a continuation of the older procuresses on the opposite side of the square. Its graceful rhythm of arches and columns was designed to express order, balance, and the enduring stability of the Republic, and to serve as a grand backdrop for ceremonies, gatherings, and daily life in the square. Today, those same halls house the Museo Correr, a museum dedicated to the culture and history of Venice. It takes its name from Theodore Correr, an aristocrat and collector who in the 19th century donated his priceless collection of maps, art, and artifacts to the city. The entrance to the museum leads through the Napoleonic wing, built in the early 1800s atop the site of a former church. This is where Napoleon once planned to install his imperial palace, overlooking what he famously called the most beautiful drawing room in Europe. After your visit, step back into the open air of St. Mark's Square. Now look to the opposite side. There, you'll see a building of perfect proportions, its facade lined with elegant columns. This is where Venice chose to protect something even more precious than its palaces: knowledge. The Marciana Library, one of the oldest and most important libraries in Europe. It was founded to house a priceless collection of manuscript, originally gifted by the poet Petrarch in the 14th century, and later expanded in 1468 by Cardinal Bessarion, a Greek humanist and scholar. After the feast for the eyes and spirit, it's time to rest. Just a few steps along the arcades of the square, you'll find a place where history tastes as good as the coffee. Caffè Florian, the oldest cafe in Venice and one of the oldest in Europe. Since 1720, it has welcomed travelers, artists, and dreamers. Step through its doors, and you step into a world from centuries past, all set to music. Because music has always lived on St. Mark's Square, cafe orchestras have long been part of its soul. The soft sound of violins and piano would float beneath the arches, mingling with conversation, laughter, and the gentle clink of coffee cups. And even today, just like then, you can sit with an espresso, watch the slow dance of shadows across the marble floor, and feel, just for a moment, part of Venice's endless story. But follow the arcades toward the lagoon, and you'll step into an entirely different world, a green, peaceful oasis. The Giardini Reali, or Royal Gardens, were created in the 19th century at Napoleon's command. When Venice, weary from centuries of independence, was drawn into a new European order. Built on the site of former docks and workshops, the garden became a place of rest and reflection, filled with trees, flowering shrubs, and quiet paths hidden behind hedges. Here, among whispering leaves and trickling fountains, Venetians and travelers alike found a moment of calm, away from the bustle of the square. As you wander the pathways, it's easy to forget that the heart of Venice beats just a few steps away. The lagoon glimmers in the distance, gondolas sway gently by the shore, and the air carries the scent of salt water and greenery. It's the perfect place to end today's walk, with Venice in your heart and music still echoing in your memory. Venice, La Serenissima, the most serene, has always been a city woven from stone and light. A city that seems to pause time between one step and the next. Today we walk together through its heart, listening to the whispers of mosaics, the shadows of columns, and the music that rises from the square like a breath from centuries past. Thank you for joining us on this journey through a dream that floats on water. If you'd like to keep exploring the secrets of Venice with us, subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you again on the next walk through La Serenissima. See you in Venice!